You walk out to your garden with your morning coffee. Yesterday, those cucumber plants looked perfect. Deep green leaves, little yellow flowers, couple of baby cucumbers just starting to swell. And today, one whole vine is lying flat on the soil like somebody let the air out of it overnight. You grab the hose, because that's what everybody does. You figure it's thirsty. But I'm going to tell you something right now that most gardeners never find out until they've killed 3 seasons of plants in a row. That wilting is almost never about water. Most cucumber plants that die do not die from neglect. They die from one specific thing that hides in plain sight, and by the time you can see the damage, the plant is already finished. I've been growing cucumbers and helping other folks fix their gardens for more than 25 years, and I've pulled up more dead vines than I can count trying to figure out what went wrong. So I know exactly what kills them, and I know the order it usually happens in. Stick with me, because the number one killer on my list is something you can diagnose in about 5 seconds with your own 2 hands, using a trick I learned from a plant pathologist that almost no home gardener has ever heard of. I still remember the first time somebody showed me. I was standing in a community garden plot outside of town, holding a dead vine, absolutely certain I had underwatered it, and an old-timer walked over, cut the stem, and proved me wrong in one move. It changed how I grow forever. This works whether you've got 2 plants in a patio pot or a whole row along the fence. So, let me count these down from the mistakes that quietly weaken your plants all the way to the silent assassin at number 1. Let me start with the one almost everybody does in the spring because they're excited and impatient. They plant their cucumbers too early in soil that's still cold. Here's the thing about cucumbers. They are a warm season crop all the way through. They are not lettuce. They are not peas. They come from the tropics originally, and their whole body chemistry is built around heat. The problem is the calendar tricks you. You get one warm week in the middle of spring, the sun feels good on your back, the garden center is packed, and you rush those little plants into the ground. But the air being warm does not mean the soil is warm. And your cucumber roots don't care what the air is doing, they care what the dirt is doing. The research on this is very clear. Most extension programs, including the folks at the University of Minnesota and Cornell, will tell you cucumber seeds really want soil that is at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit before they'll even bother germinating well. And they truly thrive when that soil hits around 70 degrees. Plant them in soil that's down around 55 or below, and one of 2 things happens. Either the seed just sits there and rots in the cold, wet ground, or the transplant survives but sulks. It stops growing. The leaves go a sad pale green, sometimes almost yellow, and the whole plant just sits there for 2 or 3 weeks doing absolutely nothing. And here's what really stings. A neighbor who waited 2 full weeks longer than you, who was patient, will end up with bigger, healthier, faster plants than yours by the middle of summer. Because their cucumbers never got that cold shock. Cold stress early in life stunts a cucumber in ways it often never fully recovers from. You paid for a head start and you actually bought yourself a setback. The fix costs you nothing but patience. Buy a cheap soil thermometer, the kind that runs about $8 or $10. Stick it 2 inches into your garden bed in the morning and don't plant until you're consistently reading 60 degrees or better. If you're impatient like I used to be, lay a sheet of black plastic over your bed for a week beforehand. It pulls the sun down into the soil and warms it up faster. That one trick can move your planting date up by a week or more safely. But getting them in the ground at the right time is only the beginning, because even a perfectly timed, healthy young plant can get quietly wrecked by the very thing you do to take care of it. And that brings me to the next mistake. You water them wrong. And I don't mean too little, and I don't mean too much. I mean when and where you put the water. Most people water their garden in the evening. It makes sense. It's cooler, you're home from work, the sun's going down, it feels like the kind thing to do. And most people water from the top, spraying the whole plant down with the hose or an overhead sprinkler, soaking the leaves along with the roots. Feels thorough, feels generous. But for a cucumber, that combination is like an open invitation to the 2 diseases that flatten more cucumber patches than anything else in this whole country: powdery mildew and downy mildew. Here's what's actually happening. When you soak the leaves in the evening, that water sits on the foliage all night long. It doesn't evaporate because there's no sun, and the temperature drops. And a cucumber leaf that stays wet for hours in the dark is the perfect nursery for fungal spores. Downy mildew in particular loves those long, cool, wet nights. You wake up and the undersides of the leaves have these angular yellow patches, and within a week or two, the whole plant can be crisping up from the bottom. Powdery mildew is the one you've definitely seen, even if you didn't know its name. It's that white, dusty coating, looks like somebody flicked flour all over the leaves. Once it takes hold, the leaves can't photosynthesize, the plant weakens, and your cucumber production drops off a cliff. And here's the part that gets me. Both of these are largely preventable, and the prevention is free. Water in the morning, not the evening. Water the soil, not the leaves. If you can get a cheap soaker hose or just aim the water down at the base of the plant, you keep the foliage dry, and dry foliage doesn't get sick nearly as often, and give your plants room to breathe. When people cram cucumber plants 12 inches apart because they want a big harvest, they choke off the airflow, the leaves stay damp longer, and disease rips through the whole crowded mess. Space them, right? Get them up on a trellis so air moves through the leaves, and you cut your disease pressure way down before it ever starts. Now, a lot of you are watering wrong and planting cold, and your plants are limping along because of it. But those two mistakes weaken the plant slowly. The next one is the one that turns your cucumbers into something you don't even want to eat, and it fools people into thinking they did everything right. Your watering is inconsistent, feast or famine, and that inconsistency is exactly what makes a cucumber turn bitter and go misshapen. Let me explain what's going on inside that fruit, because this is where it gets interesting. A cucumber is basically a water balloon with seeds. By weight, a cucumber is around 95% water. So the plant needs a steady, reliable supply to fill out those fruits smoothly and keep them sweet and mild. The general rule from most horticulture programs is that cucumbers want somewhere between 1 and 2 inches of water per week. And the key word there isn't the amount, it's steady. Steady is everything. When you let the soil dry out hard, then flood it, then let it dry out hard again, you stress the plant. And a stressed cucumber plant does something sneaky. It produces more of a natural compound called cucurbitacin. That's the chemical that makes a cucumber taste bitter. It's concentrated near the stem end and just under the skin. So you do all this work, you grow this beautiful looking cucumber, you slice into it expecting garden fresh perfection, and it tastes so bitter you have to spit it out. That's not bad luck. That's almost always the plant telling you it went through drought stress. And it's not just the taste. Uneven watering is a big reason you get those ugly, deformed cucumbers, the ones that are fat on one end and pinched and skinny on the other, curled up like a letter C. People blame the seed or the variety, but a lot of the time, that misshapen fruit came from the plant not getting consistent moisture while the cucumber was filling out. The fix here is the same cheap trick that solves the disease problem, so it's a 2-for-1. Mulch, put down a 2 to 3 inch layer of straw, shredded leaves, or grass clippings around the base of your plants. That mulch is like a thermostat and a water reservoir at the same time. It keeps the soil moisture even, it stops the surface from baking dry between waterings, and it holds that steady dampness the roots crave. A bale of straw runs you maybe $8 or $10 and covers a whole row. That's the cheapest bitterness insurance you will ever buy. If you're the kind of gardener who wants all of this in one place, the timing, the watering strategy, the soil work, the harvesting rhythm, I put everything I know into a guide called the Yard System, and it's available right now for $97 through the link in the description. It covers not just cucumbers, but the whole framework I use to set up a productive yard from the ground up, the same system behind First Look and Yard Elevated. If you've been piecing together advice from 10 different sources and still losing plants, this is the one resource that ties it all together. The link is down below. Now, I want to talk to you directly for a second, because I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking this whole video is for people with big fancy gardens and raised beds and drip systems, and you've just got a couple of plants in a pot on the patio or a small spot by the fence, and none of this really applies to you. I need you to hear me on this. the next part matters more for you than for anybody. Because when you've only got 2 or 3 plants, losing even one is losing a third of your entire harvest. The big gardener can afford to lose a plant. You can't. So this cheap, no-fuss fix I'm about to give you is aimed straight at you. Here it is. Whether you're growing cucumbers just to slice a few fresh ones onto your dinner plate all summer, or you're the type who wants a mountain of them to make pickles and hand out to the whole neighborhood, there is one habit that serves both of you, and it costs nothing. Harvest early and harvest often. This is the mistake I see gardeners make constantly, and it feels completely backwards to them. They wait, they let the cucumbers get big, because bigger feels like more food, more value, more reward. But a cucumber plant is not trying to feed you. A cucumber plant is trying to make seeds and reproduce. That's its entire purpose in life. And the moment you let a cucumber grow big and fat and start to yellow, the plant reads that as mission accomplished. Seeds are maturing, job done, and it slows way down. Sometimes it stops producing new fruit almost entirely. But if you pick those cucumbers young, while they're small and firm and the skin is still glossy, before the seeds mature, you trick the plant. It thinks it hasn't succeeded yet, so it keeps pumping out flower after flower, cucumber after cucumber, trying again and again to make those seeds. I've seen a single plant that's harvested every day or 2 produce for weeks longer and yield far more total cucumbers than a neglected plant right next to it. Same variety, same soil. The only difference was one got picked constantly and the other got left to get fat. So whether you want a handful or a flood, the move is identical. Check your plants every single day once they start producing and pick everything that's ready, even the ones you don't need yet. Give the extras away. Just get them off the vine. That daily walk through your plants does something else too. It puts your eyes on those leaves and stems every day, which means you catch the number 2 problem before it gets out of hand. And the number 2 problem is this: you're feeding your plants the wrong thing, and you're getting a jungle of leaves and almost no cucumbers. This one breaks people's hearts because they did everything with love. They fertilized, they babied those plants, and they end up with the biggest, greenest, most gorgeous cucumber vines on the whole street, leaves the size of dinner plates, vines climbing everywhere, and barely a cucumber to show for it. They come to me confused and a little hurt, and I already know what they did before they finished the sentence. They loaded it up with nitrogen. Here's the deal with plant food. Nitrogen is the nutrient that drives leafy green growth. It builds foliage, stems, all that lush vegetation, and a lot of general purpose lawn and garden fertilizers are heavy on nitrogen because for grass and leafy plants, that's exactly what you want. But a cucumber isn't a leaf crop. You're not eating the leaves, you want fruit. And when you dump high nitrogen fertilizer on a cucumber, you're basically screaming at it to grow leaves, leaves, leaves. And it happily obeys and forgets all about making cucumbers. What a cucumber actually wants, once it's established and starting to flower, is more phosphorus and potassium and less nitrogen. Phosphorus supports flowering and fruiting. Potassium helps the plant fill out those fruits and stay healthy. So instead of grabbing whatever high nitrogen bag is sitting in the garage, look at the 3 numbers on the fertilizer label. If that first number, the nitrogen number, is way bigger than the other 2, that's the wrong stuff for a fruiting cucumber. You want something more balanced, or something where the middle and last numbers are strong. And honestly, the cheapest fix of all is to feed your soil before you ever plant with a couple inches of good compost worked in, and then go easy on the bottled stuff. Compost releases nutrients slowly and gently, and it feeds the soil life that feeds your plant. I've watched gardeners spend $40 or $50 a season on fancy fertilizers chasing a better harvest, when a bag of compost in a lighter hand would have doubled their cucumbers for a fraction of the cost. Somebody's making good money selling you the idea that more feeding equals more food. With cucumbers, past a certain point, the opposite is true. There's one more piece to the leaves but no fruit problem, and it's worth 30 seconds because it saves people from ripping out a perfectly good plant in frustration. Sometimes you've got flowers but no cucumbers forming, and the flowers just shrivel and drop. Before you blame yourself, understand that cucumbers make two kinds of flowers, male and female, and the first flush of flowers a young plant puts out is usually all male. Those will never make a cucumber. They're just there to attract the bees and get the party started. The female flowers, the ones with a tiny cucumber shape already behind the bloom, come a little later. So if your young plant is flowering but not fruiting yet, give it a week or two before you panic. And if you've got female flowers but they're still not setting fruit, you may simply not have enough bees visiting, and you can hand pollinate with a small paintbrush in the morning, moving pollen from the male blooms to the female ones. Costs you nothing but 2 minutes. So now you know how to plant them at the right time, water them right, keep them sweet, feed them correctly, and harvest them to keep production rolling. Do all of that, and you'll have healthier cucumbers than most of your neighbors. But I've saved the most important one for last, because this is the killer that makes all the other stuff look like small potatoes. This is the one that takes a thriving, healthy, perfectly cared for plant and drops it dead in a matter of days, and it fools nearly everyone into treating it as a watering problem right up until it's too late. I'm talking about the cucumber beetle and the disease it carries called bacterial wilt. Let me take you back to that community garden I mentioned at the start, because this is where I learned it the hard way. I had a row of cucumbers that looked like a magazine cover. Then one morning, a couple of the vines were wilting in the heat. I thought, no problem, they're thirsty, it's a hot day, I'll water them good. I soaked them. Next morning, more wilting, and now some of it wasn't recovering even in the cool of the evening. I watered again more. I was so sure it was water. Within about a week, half that row was dead, and I had drowned the roots of the survivors trying to save them. That's when the old-timer walked over, took out his pocket knife, and showed me the trick that I'm about to give you, the trick that plant pathologists use and almost no backyard gardener knows. Here's what's really going on. There's a little beetle, striped or spotted with yellow and black, called the cucumber beetle. On its own, it chews some holes in your leaves. No big deal. The plant can handle a little chewing. But that beetle carries the bacteria that causes bacterial wilt in its gut. When it feeds on your plant, it can pass those bacteria into the wounds. Once that bacteria gets inside the plant's plumbing, its vascular system, it multiplies and produces a thick, gummy slime that physically clogs the tubes the plant uses to move water up from the roots. Think of it like cholesterol packing, shut an artery. The roots are drinking fine, the soil is plenty wet, but the water can't get up to the leaves because the pipes are plugged, so the plant wilts. And this is the cruel trick of it. The plant looks exactly like it's dying of thirst. It droops in the heat of the day. Early on, it might even perk back up overnight, which convinces you it just needed water. So you water it, doing absolutely nothing. Because water was never the problem. The plumbing is blocked from the inside, and no amount of watering can fix a clogged pipe. There is no cure for bacterial wilt. Once a plant has it, that plant is done, and every day you leave it in the ground, the beetles that are still crawling on it are carrying that bacteria over to your healthy plants. Now here is the 5-second test that would have saved me that whole row, and it's the thing I promised you at the very beginning. When a cucumber plant wilts and you're not sure why, take a knife or even just your fingernail and cut through the stem near the base, low down. Then touch the cut surface with your fingertip and slowly pull your finger away. If the plant has bacterial wilt, you will see a thin, sticky, milky white thread stretch out between the cut stem and your finger like a tiny strand of stringy glue. That string is the bacterial ooze. That's the smoking gun. A healthy plant, or a plant wilting from a different cause, won't do that. It's called the string test, and once somebody shows it to you, you never forget it. That single move tells you in 5 seconds whether you're dealing with a death sentence or just a thirsty plant. So what do you actually do about it? Because a test that only tells you your plant is doomed isn't good enough. The real answer is prevention, and the prevention has to happen early, in the first couple of weeks, after your plants go in the ground, when they're small and most vulnerable. This is the part nobody tells you. It's not about killing every beetle later. It's about protecting those young plants during that critical early window before the beetles can infect them. The single best thing you can do is cover your young plants with a floating row cover, which is a lightweight fabric that lets sun and water through but keeps the beetles off. You lay it right over the plants when you plant them, and you leave it on for the first few weeks while they establish a roll of that fabric. Costs maybe $15 or $20, and it can save your entire crop. The one thing you have to remember is that once your plants start flowering, you need to take the cover off during the day so the bees can get in to pollinate, or you'll trade a beetle problem for a no fruit problem. If you catch beetles early, knock them off into a cup of soapy water in the cool of the morning when they're sluggish and slow. Clean up all your garden debris in the fall, because those beetles overwinter in the leftover mess and come right back to hit you next spring. And if you've had wilt before, some gardeners lay down reflective silver mulch, which confuses the beetles and keeps them from landing on the plants in the first place. But the big idea, the thing I want burned into your memory, is this. When your cucumber wilts, do the string test before you reach for the hose, because watering a plant with bacterial wilt doesn't just waste your time. It can rot the roots of the one plant that might have survived, and it buys the beetles more time to spread the disease to everything else you've got growing. That's the one that got me. That's the one that gets almost everybody, because every instinct in your body says a wilting plant needs water, and with this disease, that instinct is exactly what kills the rest of your garden. So let me leave you with this. You came out here worried you had a brown thumb, worried you just weren't cut out for growing your own food. You don't have a brown thumb. You were just never told the truth about what actually kills these plants, and now you know all 5. Right down to the silent one that hides behind a symptom that looks like something completely different. You just saved yourself a whole season of heartbreak and a summer of watering a plant that was never going to make it. You strike me as the kind of gardener who would rather hear the blunt truth than a bag of feel-good advice that leaves your plants dead in July. That's who this is for. So do me a favor and tell me down in the comments, which one of these were you guilty of? Were you the one planting too early in cold soil, or the one dumping on too much nitrogen and getting all vine and no cucumbers? Or, be honest, were you standing there with the hose watering a plant that had bacterial wilt the whole time? Drop your answer below and tell me what part of the country or the world you're gardening from, because the beetle pressure and the mildew timing changes a lot depending on where you are, and I read those comments. And if you're the type who's done getting fleeced and done killing plants for reasons nobody bothered to explain, come join the rest of us who grow with our eyes open. Because next time, I'm going to show you the tomato mistake that looks exactly like a disease but is actually something you're doing every single time you touch the plant, and once you see it, you'll never make it again. If a wilting vine caught you off guard today, stay with me. Right where this video stopped, my members get the full cucumber killer countdown, root to fruit, in order. Inside, ask me your own garden question, and I answer you myself, not some bot. And you won't be alone, you'll belong in the Curb Appeal Circle. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime with one click. Now that your cucumbers are safe, let me show you how to keep lavender alive and blooming beautifully for years. The simple secrets that make all the difference are starting right here.